Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Services Cooperative Association podcast. Thank you all for joining us for this episode. And I am Elliot Howard. I'm the current chairman of the Services Cooperative Association, and I'm with CEO of the CDC Integrated Services and former chairman of the Services Cooperative Association, Jerry Cooper. And thank you, Jerry, for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's always a pleasure to visit with you, Elliot.
Oh, yes, definitely.
I like talking about business issues in general, and I like to talk about the Services Cooperative Association. And of course, I like to talk about my own business. So I'm always happy to meet with you and talk about a range of issues that are of interest to both of us.
Right, definitely. And of course, as you know, this is the 39th year of the Services Cooperative Association. We are a business development co-op chartered by the city of Houston to help entrepreneurs, business owners, business professionals improve their skill sets, diversify their skill sets, and become more effective within the companies and the careers that they are establishing through mentorship and skill development and through lessons. So every Wednesday, you all can join us at the CrossRoads Business Building Breakfast, presently at 9311 I-10 Freeway or the Katy Freeway here in Houston, Texas, at the Corner Bakery Cafe. And from 7:30 to 8:30, of course, you also get to meet our founder and friend, C. Dean Kring. And we're off to the races. It gets from 7:30 to 8:30. Get yourself a breakfast, make some contacts, but also develop and improve your, just even for an hour, skill sets will be improved, as well as relationships established for mentorship, and that will improve the future opportunities and chances for business success. So we look forward to seeing you there, and that happens again weekly, every Wednesday from 7:30 to 8:30 at the Corner Bakery Cafe on the Katy Freeway. So today, we always start out with every episode, we talk about the news of the day, what is the topic of discussion as far as news, and then we'll go into the main portion of the show, which of course we will discuss an event that's coming up with Jerry Cooper and what he's doing in the community. So we're going to cover both of those today, but right now, Jerry, what is the news topic that has really caught your interest?
Well, as you know, I'm a member of a couple of different professional organizations, one of them being the Houston West Chamber of Commerce. And it's coincidental that one of the things that was discussed in the past week was the fact that small businesses often don't understand the high hurdles that they have to overcome financially, not only to get their businesses started, but to sustain their businesses. And as not only did I participate in this forum last week on that particular subject, but I also met with a group of individuals that want to start up a company.
Oh.
And I you know, one of the members, a young man by the name of Andrew Bermudez.
Okay.
I met with him and his team, and they spent the better part of the first half hour talking to me about the new project that they're working on and their expectations for creating a business out of it. And I had to bring them down to earth and ask them how much time they had spent on putting together a financial picture to sustain this business. It's interesting that in the way that we teach young children how to read and understand what they read,
right?
We sometimes have to teach adults how to read numbers and how to figure out how to put the numbers together in a way that makes sense. And I gave them a couple of specific examples about the fact that everybody focuses on the things that they have to do to get the ball rolling without giving adequate recognition to the fact that they can't do everything themselves. They have to eventually figure out how to bring somebody in to help them, whether it's on a task basis, having some 1099 person do certain tasks, or whether they bring in an employee on a part-time basis, whether they bring in an employee on a full-time basis. They think they're saving money by bringing in a 1099. And in a couple of respects, they are, but that's only in the short term, because you still have to manage that 1099 person you have to make sure that you're reporting him properly on your books, that he's not an employee, he's a 1099. And when it comes time to hire somebody, it costs the small business about 20% more to hire somebody than it does a large corporation.
Yes.
Most companies think, most small companies starting out think that hiring a person at that level is going to be easier and cheaper than for a big company to hire somebody. And it's counterintuitive, because it's the opposite. You spend on average 20% more per employee than a large company does, because they have efficiencies of scale that the small company will never achieve. So if they're going to hire somebody, whether it's on a part-time basis or on a full-time basis, they have to know with a high degree of confidence that that person's going to stick around for a while.
Right.
And in this very, very tight labor market, holding on to employees is becoming a major challenge, regardless of the size of your company. But for a small company, it's especially challenging.
Yes, it is.
So I had part of the discussion was with this group of budding entrepreneurs, is figuring out, first of all, are they going to be able to put together a relatively accurate financial picture, and recognize that financial picture has got to forecast these other costs down the road.
Right. So they figured out, after talking with you, that it wasn't as simple as getting into a car and driving it. It actually is, you literally are building, you have to build the car first,
right,
and then be able to drive it. And then so I can only imagine their eyes getting a little bit wider as you broke that stake down.
Yeah, I'm trying to maintain a sense of optimism for them, because people start companies every day. And starting the company is the first step. Once you start the company, okay, how do we keep it going forward? How do we keep the momentum going? And it's interesting that while they focus on the nuts and bolts of their skills, they find it inordinately challenging to stay focused on managing the pieces in a way that an orchestra leader manages multiple pieces of music inside an orchestra. And the orchestra leader can have all the sections of the orchestra performing in concert with each other, so that beautiful music is created. Well, you have to have something of an orchestra leader in you to have all the moving pieces of a company work in a synergistic way. And too many small companies don't pay enough attention to making those individual pieces function smoothly. So
what was the response?
I had this 3-point conversation with this group of people about knowing what the numbers are actually going to look like, knowing how you're going to allocate the hours to the business, whether it's going to be by the parties directly involved, or they can bring in other people to help the hours that'll take to sustain the business. That would be, when you're talking about your own efforts or the efforts of employees, you have to translate the next 12 months into hours.
Right. So how did so for example, what were their response? What were, during the course of this discussion? How did they receive the advice you were giving them?
Well, so some of the advice they understood intuitively, and other
Right.
parts of the advice generated a number of questions. And I said, well, look at it this way. If you look at a typical restaurant here in Houston,
Yeah.
whether it's a Mexican restaurant or Italian restaurant or whatever, and forget the chain restaurants. Okay, I'm talking about the restaurants that are owned by individual people.
Hmm.
The owner and the chef, those two individuals put in maybe 4,000, between 4,000 and 5,000 hours a year. The
Hmm.
average employee works 2,100 hours a year.
Right.
But an owner and his primary employee in the restaurant, that being the chef,
Mm.
they work over 4,000 hours a year.
Yes, they do.
And so they have every hour of the year mapped out. They know when the shift starts, when the shift ends. They know who's at the backup when the primary cook has to be away. They
Hmm.
know the wait staff, part-time and mostly, but they've
Hmm.
got the calendar laid out for all 365 days, and they know which day, which people are going to occupy which days.
Hmm.
As it's, you need to do that. You need to have a calendar of your year broken down into hours, and how many hours over the course of this year are you going to work on this business.
Right.
There were 6 people at this meeting last week. So if you look at that 365-day year calendar and you put all the hours down, how many
Right.
of you are going to, how many hours on that calendar are each of you going to allocate to the business?
Hmm.
That caught them by surprise.
I bet it did.
Because
It's an eye
they
opener.
hadn't thought about it in those terms, but that they have to do that. They have to, okay, for the month of October, okay, then how many hours are going to go into the business in October, and who's going to put how many hours into it? You have to do that for 12 months out.
Right.
And then you have to put numbers against that.
Definitely.
So it was, hopefully they walked away with some things to chew on mentally. And I'm meeting with them next Saturday, and so we'll see how well they did with their homework over the next this week and this coming week.
Well, it'll be time for some beneficial follow-up. Hopefully they took that advice to heart. And the listeners, as you're listening to this, these are all points that you in your own business, and even as an owner, entrepreneur, or as a business professional, planning is definitely, these are nuggets I get from this, is planning is definitely key. Before you do anything, make sure you count the cost of it all, because a wrong decision can be very expensive, both in a financial way and even in a logistic way, which still comes back to the finances, because you have to fix the mistake that you made. So there's this. I wish I could be a fly on the wall to hear, just to see how that discussion goes. But please definitely keep us posted. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the Services Cooperative Association podcast, and I'm with my co-host Jerry Cooper, who's the CEO of CDC Integrated Services, and I'm Elliot Howard. I'm a financial representative with Western and Southern, and we both have served as chairman for the Services Cooperative Association, now in its 39th year. Now, Jerry, we have to talk, because you've been on a speaking tour, and you just had a phenomenal one back in August, and you have another one coming up in October, I believe, right?
Yes, it's tentatively set for the 20th. I'm waiting to hear from the manager of the restaurant to make sure that it fits into the restaurant's calendar.
Okay.
But yes, I have one coming up next month.
All right. So the title of it is fun, but I know that the topic is very serious. Why don't you share what the topic is, what the name of this presentation is, and then let's have a discussion about what you're going to be talking about.
Okay. I titled the topic of the talk, "The Secret of the Orange." There is a story in a management theory book that I read a number of years ago about how an orange played a significant role in a conflict,
Okay.
and how the solution around the orange is not immediately obvious.
Okay.
And the subtext of my talk is that when people gather around a table in a business environment, they often misunderstand the difference between talking about a subject and having a conversation about a subject.
Mm-hmm.
The two are entirely different. If you're
Right.
talking about a subject, there's going to be virtually no positive outcome.
Right.
But if you have a conversation, that generally leads to actions that produce results. The
See,
challenge is, how do you have that conversation that yields, that produces action at the end?
can I ask you something? Because this goes back to something that you're really good in the presentation, the talk you had back in August. You took words that we generally assume as being the same and pointed out the difference, and from conflict, argument, discussion, you went ahead and pointed out that they're not the same. They're used in the interaction daily as if they are the same, but they're really not interchangeable. All words have a different meaning.
Yes.
So now I'm having a conversation with you now, and in this, we're having a discussion, and you're saying that talking about a subject and having a conversation about a subject are two entirely different things. Now, I know that communication is an imperfect process. I mean, because people come with their own backgrounds and their filters that from their environments and their experiences that they've had. But the way you're presenting this right now is how, like, even something as simple as the difference of talking about a subject and having a conversation about it, you have just blown my mind. Okay, so let's cut that stake up. What is the difference between talking about a subject versus having a conversation about a subject?
Okay. When you're talking about something, in almost every instance, not every instance, but almost every instance, you're starting from a previous stopping point.
Okay.
Okay. In other words, talking about something, you begin with a conclusion,
Okay.
and no successful outcome in the future is based upon a past conclusion.
That's deep.
Okay. You have to have a framework for action that doesn't make the decision in the past the starting point. That's not, I'm saying it badly off the cuff, but what I'm trying to say is very simple. If you want to have a constructive conversation,
Okay.
you have to frame this conversation today in the context of the questions you want answered. If you talk about something, you're not going to take the time to create questions and create a common understanding about the questions that are going to be raised and addressed. Talking about things, you're picking up where you left off.
Right.
And one of the things I'll talk about in this meeting is why the agenda is often not a constructive document, because the agenda is often misunderstood, and the agenda's purpose is often misunderstood.
Okay.
Okay, because agendas are designed to pick up where you left off.
Okay.
And if you don't understand that the starting point isn't the conclusion. The starting point is what questions do we need to look at
Right.
since we last talked about it.
Okay.
Very few people think in terms of, okay, what questions need to be answered today that we can then say, okay, what was discussed in the past that can be connected to what we now know. It's not so much starting over, is making sure the foundation that you thought you had is still a firm foundation.
Okay.
The only way you can determine whether you have built a firm foundation is you start with the questions, not with a conclusion. And people who talk about a subject almost always through habit start with where they concluded the last meeting or concluded the last discussion. And they start from that point. So I talk about constructing conversations based upon the questions that need to be asked in the present.
Wow. So let me ask you this. How much different would a business development representative, regardless of the field, when they're meeting with a prospective client, how much better would those interactions be if they use the premise that you're talking about and having a conversation as opposed to just talking about and being knowledgeable that there is a difference between the two, where they're dealing with a prospect? Because you're a CEO. I'm pretty certain that you have plenty of business development people from different industries coming to you, offering services or products to help you do what you do.
Yes.
How do you notice the difference between someone is with what you're saying in mind? Because there's a lot of application I'm seeing with that. How can you tell the difference? How they're able to apply your concept with what they're doing with their approach?
I get a lot of companies approaching me about the things that they can do to make my company better. And I discount 98% of those inquiries for one simple reason.
Okay.
They go on my website and they know that we are a conflict solutions company. If they study my website, they know that I have a newsletter that I've been writing since 2013.
Okay.
And all of those newsletters are available on my website.
Yes.
I think maybe 1 in 10 that I talk to has read one of my newsletters.
Wow. Okay.
They do a cursory review of the website. They look at the services I provide. They look at who I provide the services to, but they don't drill down to see what specifically it is that we do inside other companies. They learn that from the newsletters that I write, but very, very, very few people actually go to that section of my website that talks about the newsletter and bother to read any of them. And so I politely thank them for their time and I dismiss them, say, no, we don't, I'm not in a position to do business with you right now.
Right.
And so every once in a while, I find somebody who's bothered to learn what it is we do and understand how we operate inside other companies. And they ask real questions. And then we have a discussion of what they do and whether or not it would benefit my company. And I have sometimes hired them to do something for me, but most of the time, there's not a direct correlation because I'm in a niche market, a unique niche. And so it takes somebody that can configure their product or their service to align with what I do to attract my interest.
But
I have no interest in modifying how I do my work. to accommodate somebody else's product or service. It has to be the other way around.
But that business development person gets that, will learn that through actually by doing the research and actually having a conversation, as opposed to talking to you.
That's correct.
Then the way I'm concluding that, even if they, in the result of the conversation, instead of talking to you, they come and approach you for a conversation, they have that conversation, and it's concluded as a result of the conversation that there can't be a business transaction here, but it still leaves more of a favorable impression, because you might know somebody that they might be able to do business with, and because they had a conversation with you instead of talking to you, they're more likely to get that referral, because anyone in the business development arena, that's where they make their bread and butter. Really, it's not the immediate person in front of you, it's the next situation, and you're more likely to get the close if you get a positive referral, and you get the positive referral if you actually have a conversation.
That's right.
Instead of just simply talking to the person.
That's correct.
Okay. Drawing the conclusion. Like, because talking with you is a deep dive, and it's like, there's so much in here with that can be applied in just across the board. Because I'm thinking just about if an accountant is, we'll just say like a controller in a company needs to have a conversation. It would be more profitable for the company if they're going to meet with the marketing department to come in the form of a conversation, as opposed to having just talking with the fellow department, the marketing department head, the marketing manager.
Well, in the course of the presentation that I'll make, I'll be emphasizing that conversations are designed around things that are very organic to the individuals that are having the conversation. For example, the conversation isn't really successful unless you're prepared to offer real life examples. And we often use metaphors as a way of illustrating the examples. Metaphors are very powerful devices in literature. They're also very powerful devices in creating effective conversations.
Okay.
We can't be afraid to talk about things that help the parties relate to each other.
Right.
And that means telling a personal story or using a famous metaphor.
Right.
But I caution them about the importance of using the metaphor correctly.
Right.
For example, about 25 years ago, there was a very famous movie called Forrest Gump.
I remember that.
And in the movie, Tom Hanks says that his mother told him that life was like a box of chocolates. You never knew what you're going to get. Okay.
Right.
Well, I'm paraphrasing it because I don't have the quote memorized.
Right.
But a lot of people have borrowed part of that metaphor.
Yes.
To make a particular point. And what I explain in this particular exercise that I call the secret of the orange is you have to use the whole metaphor or not use it at all, because it's like taking part of a sentence and trying to make people believe that the part of the sentence that you use is relevant to the conversation. And that's never true. You have to use the whole sentence to provide context. As a matter of fact, the name of my newsletter is Putting It in Context. And, and so in what we do here at CDC Integrated Services, it's all about making sure that people are working from the same set of common denominators, that we have the same definitions, they're working from the same understandings. And so you can never lose context. And metaphors are powerful devices for maintaining context and advancing the story, the narrative that makes conversations work.
And ladies and gentlemen, this is Elliot Howard and Jerry Cooper of the Services Cooperative Association podcast. And we're having a really great discussion right now about the secret of the orange, which is a talk that we'll be having, that Jerry Cooper will be having later on in the month of October. You don't want to miss this. So, Jerry, in final talks about the secret of the orange, what is the one thing that you some goals that are you hope that people will get from understanding this secret of the orange and the context and everything that we've discussed today?
The actions that I want people to take away from this upcoming presentation is very simple. There are opportunities to solve problems that people have, for a variety of reasons, been reluctant to deal with because they're not certain how to start the process of resolving a particular conflict or disagreement in their particular workplace. Mm-hmm. And my expectation is that they will have a greater degree of comfort opening a conversation about something that has bothered them at work. And they'll be able to do it in a way that they're confident they can achieve success, as opposed to fearing failure. Many people have an ongoing conflict. It's a low-level conflict that flares up every once in a while, and they're never sure how to approach it and resolve it and put it behind them. And so they have all kinds of ways of working around it because they're afraid of failing.
Right.
Hopefully this particular session, if they attend it, will give them a greater degree of confidence it's okay to approach others about a particular issue and do so in the context of a conversation.
Definitely.
That will lead to a successful outcome.
Definitely. I will say this. I'm gonna take all the advice you've given today and really make it even more of a focus for me to have more conversations. Having conversations is what this podcast is all about. The Services Cooperative Association podcast, because we are living this out. We have conversations here. We've never, since we first met, just simply talked to one another. So, and I've always appreciated that about you, Jerry.
Thank you.
For the years that we've worked together within the organization, and I'm certain that the young men that were listening to you, that you were bestowing advice on, definitely have had plenty of things to chew on and study and think about as they're moving forward. Because conversation is really key. I view life as being a web. That what you do in the business, you can also take that into your personal life. Because if you're dealing with a spouse, dealing with kids, dealing with friends, family in general, all those other relationships, any type of human interaction, it's better to have a conversation than just simply talking to, because misunderstandings happen when people are just simply talking to each other instead of actually having a conversation.
That's right.
So, Jerry, why don't you let us know where we can find you, what you're doing, and of course, remind us about, again, the date, the time, and where they can stay tuned with you as this event is coming up.
As with the last one, it'll be on eBright by the end of next week.
Okay.
And it's targeted for October 20th at Harold's in the Heights.
Okay.
It'll be a luncheon meeting between 11:30 and 1.
Okay.
And if they want to know more about what we do, the company name is CDC Integrated Services, and we are available on the internet at cdcintegratedservices.com.
That is wonderful. And ladies and gentlemen, one other place that you could definitely run into Jerry, as well as myself, weekly, Wednesday morning, 7:30 to 8:30, the CrossRoads Business Building Breakfast at 9311 Katy Freeway at the corner of Echo Lane and Katy Freeway at the Corner Bakery. You will find, you can join us there, meet us, have those discussions, have conversations with us.
Absolutely.
Right. About us and the other attendees. And there'll always be things to work about, things to discuss, and also relationships that can be developed into mentorship. So we can all get better at those conversations. You can find me at Elliot Howard on Facebook. Also, I'm with Western and Southern. So you just Google Elliot Howard with Western and Southern, and my link to my website will pop up there for that, as well as coming to the Services Cooperative Association Facebook page. Stay tuned for all the news and events that are happening there for the Services Cooperative Association. Make sure that you join us on a weekly basis there, and we look forward to seeing you. Jerry, it has been another wonderful conversation with you for this podcast, and I look forward to having more in the future.
Yes.
I learn something every time that I'm with you. And again, it's always an honor doing this with you. And again, thank you for your service to the country. Okay.
I appreciate that. I appreciate it so much.
And you have yourself a great weekend. I am as well. And we look forward to seeing everybody again for the Services Cooperative Association podcast. Have a good day.